Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is James Goodman and I'm with the digital events team here at Circe Dynix, and I'll be your host today. Now, as you know, we offer a variety of monthly webinars on different topics, and today we are talking about becoming a pro at professional development. Now, we are so excited today to hear from Jay Turner, Senior Consultant for Talent and Organizational Development for the American Red Cross, who you may recognize from his 2015 profile in Library Journal as one of their movers and shakers in education, as well as his position on the board of PLA. Now, I really want to quickly go over today's agenda before we get started. Jay Turner's presentation will include sections on finding alignment for your professional development needs with organizational goals, as well as the 70-20-10 model, and creating e-portfolios that showcase workplace learning. Now, after Jay's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session, so make sure to enter any questions you have in the question box on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll bring them up throughout the presentation as well as at the end. Now, remember, we'll also be monitoring our Twitter feed throughout the conversation, so you can reach us at #SDWebinars or either of the Twitter handles up on the screen. Now, we also will call for some audience participation throughout the presentation, so keep the chat box open and feel free to enter any thoughts you may have. Now, as usual, this presentation is being recorded and will be available as an on-demand webinar. We will make sure to notify everyone when that is available. So that's everything. Let's turn it over to you, Jay.
All right. Hey, thank you for that. You know, experience is a funny thing. You live through certain events and you get a sense that they might be important at the time, but it's only until you look through the rear view of hindsight can you really tell how impactful those experiences really are. 12 years ago, I was shelving books in the library branch that I worked in. I was a circulation assistant at the time. I had been with the library system for about a year, and I had been promoted to a full-time circulation assistant rather than a part-time assistant. And during that year I had been on the job, I had made some headway into showing my team, my coworkers, that I was a pretty good asset to the library. I was hardworking, I was diligent, I had some subject matter expertise with our integrated library system. People knew that I could handle like challenging customer situations. And so I thought that I had built up enough street cred in that library system that I had a realistic chance of interviewing and maybe even getting this job of circulation supervisor just because I had done good work. So 12 years ago, I'm shelving books in the stacks, and my manager comes to get me. She says, "Jay, can I see you in my office?" And I'm convinced at that moment it was going to be the moment that was going to change my life. I was thinking that my manager was going to take me to the office and say, "Jay, I think you'd be a good candidate for circulation supervisor." So back then, you know, full of young braggadocio, I huff up my chest and I get my swag on, even before swag was a thing, and I trail my manager into our office. But when we get in there and the door closes, I can tell that the conversation is not necessarily the one that I thought I was going to have. My manager, she slid her glasses down her nose and she said, "Jay, I need to talk to you." And she says, "I just got back from a directors exchange meeting, and the director has announced that the library is going to undergo a reorganization." And she says, "What this means is we're going to move away from being a traditional hierarchy to an organization that's more flattened. And what that typically means is that we're going to have fewer levels of management in the organization." And she says, "Jay, look, I know that you had your heart set on the circulation supervisor position, but as a part of this reorganization, that position is not going to exist anymore. Have you ever been punched in the throat?" Because I have, and I really felt like I had been punched in the throat when she said that. But, you know, she continues to say, "Another thing that's going to happen as a result of this reorganization is that the way that the inside of our branches look and the way that we serve our customers is going to be different. So instead of having two departments, one for circulation and one for reference, we were going to move to a one help desk model." Now, for all my public library people out there right now on the call, I know that you've probably seen the one help desk in action a lot. But back when we did this in 2003, I believe that my system was probably one of the first in the Southeast to really experiment with this new model. And so I'm thinking, this is going to be a culture change inside of the branch, but I can deal with that. But then my manager, she drops the bombshell. She says, Jay, I also want you to know that the job that you're in right now, circulation assistant, this position is going to go away by attrition. Now, don't worry, you're not going to get a pink slip. No one's getting laid off. But what this means is, as people leave the job, we're not going to replace them. And so I went into this conversation thinking that I was going to have a chance to get promoted, and I walked out of there worried about my future, worried about my job. That was very hard. But when I look back in the rear view of that conversation, it's not the bad news that I got that stands out to me the most of this day, but it was actually what happened when I was leaving my manager's office. She says, Jay, look, I want to tell you something. This change that's happening within the library is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. There's nothing that either one of us could have done to make this any differently. But what I want you to think about is when things change, there are opportunities to fix things that are broken. And there are ways that we can get better. And I want you to know that there's no such thing as luck. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And when I look back in the rear view of that conversation, it's the last part that stands out to me most. That times change. And when things change, it's all about perspective. We can either be defeated by it or we can look at it as a way to improve and to get better. And also when it comes to our own careers, we own our futures. There's no such thing as luck. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So that organizational restructuring that took place 12 years ago was my first, but it certainly wasn't the last major change that I will live through. I'm sure that almost everyone here on the line today has experienced a lot of change in, say, the last decade, or the last 5 years, or even the last year. You see, I think we live in this world of permanent whitewater where change is not only constant, but it's pervasive and it's paradigm busting and it's expensive. This is a business environment of rapid change. I mean, think about your own professional life right now. And I'm sure that you can see waves of whitewater everywhere around you. I mean, whether it's within your own library organization, whether it's out in the communities that you serve, or maybe it's even nationwide at the industrial level, there are changes around you. So I want you all to humor me just for 30 seconds. I want you to type into the chat box as many examples of permanent whitewater that you're seeing in your own professional life. So what are some of those changes that you're seeing in your own life right now? Go ahead and put those in the chat box.
We're getting some great ones in. Susanna says budget cuts. We've got a new strategic direction. Reduced service points, reduced staffing, a bunch of, staffing cuts, administrative changes. I mean, there's some very consistent things that everyone is facing. Budget cuts comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, that is the environment that we live in. So I know that even through your own eyes, you can see the change that we're living through, and the data actually bears this out. So on the screen here is a chart that I pulled from the work of John Kotter, and he wrote a book called Accelerating Change, which I really love. Kotter is probably like the preeminent thought leader on change management. So basically, if you've ever taken a project management course, or if you've ever implemented like a large-scale institutional change, you're probably using some of the principles from Kotter. And so on the screen here, Kotter says that change that we're seeing is happening across all industries and all sectors. And when you look at the rate of change, it's interesting that it's not linear, it's exponential. So what we're seeing is that the stakes are higher for us to be able to move quickly and to move smartly. So in this sea of permanent whitewater that libraries are finding themselves in, and kind of pointing back to some of those examples, whether it's dealing with shifting customer expectations or stagnant or shrinking budgets, or even having to think about transforming fundamentally how we serve our communities, it's important, I believe, that people, the library's most valuable asset, that we be nimble with the way that we learn so that we can help our organizations be more agile when they're doing their work. The good news is that with all this change, there are windows of opportunity that are opening not only for our profession and not only for our organizations, but also for us personally. I think the best skill that we can have in a time of permanent whitewater is this ability to be able to learn more and to learn more quickly. People, again, are the engines that drive libraries forward. So whether you're working in the trenches, doing the frontline service work, whether you're a manager that coordinates like the workflows, whether you're the leader who shapes the direction, we all are these motors that enable the libraries to deliver our services to our communities. So, we know that in order to be at our best, that we have to continually learn and to grow. I think that every day that we're not learning, it's like a day that we fall behind. And we also know that learning and development brings invaluable returns to the library. So I think when we're given an opportunity to grow on the job, we contribute more positive impact to the bottom line of a library. I mean, people are more engaged. We develop new ideas to solve big problems. It inspires us to get innovative when we're able to like really plug in and grow and work with our passions in our job. So why is it that employee learning and development in libraries often tends to get short shrift? Now, I'm not saying that every library is not paying attention or feeding their learning and development programs that like they should. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is in my own experience and having worked in this space for a really long time and having worked with a lot of libraries across the country, I can tell you that I think it's more often than not that libraries are not able to really feed and see their learning and development programs the way that they should. So the International Federation of Library Associations, they put together 10 best practices for continuing education and professional development. And I looked at those 10 best practices, and to me, there are four that are really like the benchmarks of what constitutes an effective learning program. And so I'm going to put up those four benchmarks in my mind, and let's just see how your libraries stack up. So first, does your library have a learning and development program that has a range of learning activities, whether they're formal and informal, and they appeal to all different types of audiences, as well as different skill levels? Does your library have an organization-wide commitment to learning? Is the administration sold on learning as a way to help us be better at what we do as we serve the community? And also from the bottom up, are the employees there really committed to learning and growing on a regular basis? But also, when it comes to money, are libraries spending 0.5 to 1% of their budget on learning and development? And lastly, at your library or the libraries that you think of, are there 10% of work hours available for learning and development? You know, I mean, think about that. These are like the benchmarks. And I'm just going to ask you to put in a chat box. I mean, how many, just say yes. If your libraries hit all four of these benchmarks, just say yes. And I'm going to take a guess here. Out of the 100 people we have on the line, we probably have maybe fewer than 20 yeses. But I say all of this to say that if you work in one of these libraries that's able to meet these four benchmarks, consider yourself pretty lucky. However, I will say this. If your library doesn't or cannot support learning and development the way that it should based on those benchmarks, I'm going to give you some realistic tips, some strategies, some best practices that you can use on your own so that you can take the bull by its horns when it comes to your career development while also creating value for the libraries that you serve. So we're going to look at today three interconnecting concepts of what I call becoming a pro at professional development. And I really think that these concepts give you an opportunity to take control of your continual learning so that you can create value and impact inside of the professional spheres that you work in. So first and foremost, on this journey of becoming a pro at professional development, I think that you have to be able to find an alignment between your personal wants and developmental needs, and then also what your library expects of you and your performance and how you're helping the library meet its goals and its direction in the community. So let me ask you, how many of y'all out there hate your annual performance reviews? And you can share that in the chat box or not, but how many of y'all hate your performance reviews? I mean, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of them. It's not that I'm fundamentally opposed to performance reviews. I think that they can give us meaningful feedback, both to the employee and to the library when they're done right. But in some of my experiences, the performance evaluation just kind of feels like a hoop that everybody jumps through so you can check something off a list. And so, you know, I've looked at a lot of different ways that people are evaluated in libraries, and what you see is kind of like a common template emerge. So essentially, here's what happens. You're probably told that, you know, every year you need to write some goals. And yeah, your goals should probably be SMART, and we all know what the SMART goals are. And then you probably receive some guidance that says your SMART goals should account for how you contribute to the big picture of the library. Your SMART goals should account for how your daily work contributes to like the success of your branch or your department. And then you might be asked to account for how you're going to grow during that review period. And so for each one of these areas, you probably have some success criteria that are defined by you or your leadership or by both. And then you might meet once or twice in that year to review your progress along those goals. And then finally, The annual review process comes in. You either pass, you fail, you get remediated and put on an action plan, and oftentimes nobody cares. So what I'm here today to tell you is that even if you work in an environment where your performance goals are afterthoughts, you personally have the power to make these goals more meaningful for your own growth. And that's what it's all about. This is about you, and this is about how you grow. I think that people engage more on the job when they listen to their favorite radio station. It's called We FM. What's in it for me? I mean, people go hard in life when there's something that can be gained, and working is no different. People go above and beyond the call of duty when they can really plug in their passions and their skills into what they do on a daily basis. I mean, we do more when we are purposely working to improve ourselves and to follow up on our own career desires. So I think that when you bring all four of those areas to the job, we need to have those fulfilled, just like the library as an organization expects us to help it fulfill its goals in the community. I think that we also have our own personal wants that need to be fulfilled on the job. So I'm going to say something dangerous right now because, I mean, today I'm feeling dangerous. I feel like the king of dangerous ideas. And so my dangerous idea for this morning is whenever you're making your goals for work, I think your goals should first and foremost be about you. Because ultimately, you only get one career, you only get one life, and this is all about you and how you can grow, but also through your growth and development, how you can help the library be the best that it can be. So I'm not saying that you put that inside of your goal statement. I'm not saying that you talk about that out loud to your boss, but I do think that you should always be keeping that internal focus as you really try to become a pro professional development. So my challenge to you is going to be, how do you align your development needs with your organization's goals? And so I have a little model that I think of when I think of how can I plug in these items into the way that my organization expects me to perform. So I say you need to look at your passions. You look at your skills, your aspirations, and your own developmental needs. And then as you are writing your goals, you think about how can I plug my passions, my skills, my aspirations, and also get what I need out of this. How can I plug that into the work that I do while I help fulfill the library's mission, or when I'm helping the library deliver on its strategy through a strategic plan, or on the projects that I work on, or through my daily work? How can I take these four areas and plug them into the bigger picture of what the library wants and also into the strategic direction that the library has? So I want to give you an example that comes to mind for me. So when I was working as a training manager at a large suburban library system, we rolled out Microsoft SharePoint to be our new library's intranet. And so one of our performance goals for the year was to get the library system, the library staff, trained up on using this new intranet, even though I had zero experience with SharePoint, so I had to learn how to do it myself. So my own personal learning involved a lot of formal training, and it was particularly the self-paced modules, the e-learning that came from Microsoft. But when it was time for me to train the staff members, I didn't want all of their learning to be like these boring e-learning modules. I wanted it to be fun. And so I'm a gamer at heart. And so I started thinking, what can I do to make learning SharePoint more like a game? Now, this was back in 2007. And I'll say that back then, blog-based gaming was a thing on LiveJournal. My sister-in-law was really into it. And I remember I was poking around in SharePoint one day, and I really I stumbled across the blog features. And I was thinking, you know what? I think there's a real opportunity here to make a game out of blogging where people can also get to use the system. And so what I did was I actually did an online book discussion. The book was Leadership Principles of Attila the Hun. And that year, the library had a focus on leadership throughout all levels of the organization. That was one of its priorities, was leadership at any level. And so what I did was I created a blog-based game based around this book, where people who participated, they were invited to make a Hun profile. So for me, I was Bunny the Hun. And whenever we were to contribute to the discussion about this book on the SharePoint blogs, we all used our Hun identity, and people had a grand old time using it. So not only were people learning how to use SharePoint while they were playing the game, we were also reinforcing a strategic focus for the library. And so when you look at this example, this is one way of saying, hey, I had a personal passion for games. I found a way to accomplish a work goal through training people in the system. We had fun doing it, and also a byproduct of this was we supported the library's overall strategy. So that's what I challenge you to do. I challenge you to think about the things you work on. Are there ways that you can strategically plug in to get what you want? So since we talked about ways that you can align your needs and goals with like the needs of the organization and how it wants you to perform, let's look at how we can find the actual experiences, the learning experiences that can help us meet those goals that we define. So let's play a game. I want you to briefly share what has been your most meaningful learning experience. So take a minute and in the chat box, if you feel so compelled, share with us what was your most meaningful learning experience. And then also answer, how did that learning occur? All right, do we have some responses coming in?
Yes, Carrie said that an in-person week-long course that was very practical, hands-on, and in an area that was crucial to her position was an experience that she remembered.
Excellent. Well, as people continue to do that, I'll move along, but I'm sure there's probably some rich conversation that's happening there, and I'd love to read some of these responses on the chat log when this is over.
Yeah, we actually had one more come in from Vanessa, and she said that learning to juggle was crucial to her. It was a
Oh,
class in college, and the teacher was showing education students how frustrating a new task could be.
yeah, that sounds like a very invaluable lesson to learn and also fun. So earlier this year, I was working on becoming certified to teach a class through my current employer, and the name of that class was Role of the Frontline Supervisor. And the portion of the class was devoted to helping managers understand the different methods for driving employee development. So we performed an exercise just like the one that I asked you to do, and I'll say that in this class, we found that most of the learning experiences that were shared they happened in informal settings. So it wasn't necessarily in a class or wasn't necessarily taking a course, but rather it was learning through some type of experience. And so this idea of like learning formally versus informally, there's an author named Jay Cross, and he wrote a book called Informal Learning. And what he found was that most of the learning that we get, it happens informally and socially through our experiences rather than taking place inside of a classroom or, in my case, with a SharePoint training, sitting behind a computer in isolation and clicking through a PowerPoint-based learning object to learn how to use a system. So Cross pretty much says that 80% of the learning that we get is informal and 20% of it is formal. And I think that most of us kind of intuitively get this. Winston Churchill said, personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I don't always like to be taught. And I think that that is true for many of us. So this idea that we learn more informally rather than formally is nothing new. So over 30 years ago, before the internet and social networking and before e-learning became these ubiquitous things, I'm using my air quotes here behind my computer, before they became things that really influence how we live and how we interact with each other and how we learn, there's an organization called the Center for Creative Leadership, and they're based out of North Carolina, and I know that so many library people know about their work. And so what the COC found back 30 years ago, they were looking at how executives learn and grow and change over the course of their careers. And what they found was the way that people become successful leaders were that they learn like this. They learn mostly through challenge assignments. And then they learn secondarily through developmental relationships. And then they got the last bit of their leadership development through courses and training. And so what's happened in the realm of learning, there's a gentleman named Charles Jennings, and he was the former, I believe, the chief learning officer at Thomson Reuters, and he adapted this model to the 70-20-10 model for growing workforce capability. And what Jennings would tell you is he believes that we operate in a world where it's more important to know how and to know who rather than to know what. And Jennings says that 70% of learning we get through experience by hands-on, and 20% of what we get is through interacting and collaborating with others, and then that last 10% of learning, that's the stuff that comes through like the formal training and workshops and programs of that nature. So when you look at what Jennings says for about building workforce capability, about building ourselves, 90% of what we learn comes through our experiences and by connecting with others, and only a small fraction comes from those formalized programs. So I think that if you look at the world around you, it's really full of that 70% stuff, those on-the-job experiences that you can leverage for your own professional development. See, the beauty of this is you don't have to spend a lot of money in order to get rich learning activities that can help you towards your goals. And when I look back over my own career, which has definitely been anything but a traditional trajectory for like a library worker, I can tell you that really plugging into those experiences around me were instrumental in helping me not only be able to deliver some value and impact for the libraries I work for, but it also really led me being able to work some really, really cool jobs that I've loved. Every single job that I've had, I've loved it. So remember, again, 70% of what we learn by doing. And that's putting our hands on something, that's playing in the dirt, that's building the proverbial airplane while we fly it. I first really started seeing the importance of plugging those experiences in really early in my career. And so I want to go back to when the library underwent that reorganization. Like the first thing that changed in our branch was we went from having those two departments, circulation and information, and we consolidated to the one help desk. So I knew, I was thinking back at the time that at some point, these two departments are going to have to work together and that we're going to have to cross-train each other, particularly the circulation workers needed to help the information workers be able to do more circulated activities. So, I mean, knowing that that was going to be a change that was going to eventually occur, I decided that I was going to take some of my subject matter expertise and using the ILS, the Integrated Library System, and my passion, for lack of a better word, for like customer service, and I was going to work with the reference workers and just kind of showing some things about how to do like circulated tasks. And what ended up happening was I spent a lot of time working with the reference librarians. And so while I was showing them how to do some of these circ tasks, I was also watching them as they modeled like really good behaviors when they were doing like the reference interview. And I watched them how they created workflows, and I watched them answer these reference questions. So by the time I finally finished undergrad and I interviewed for the library associate position, which was, a couple pay grades higher than what I was in, I got the job on the first try. And I think that a big part of that was because I had an opportunity to learn informally through those experiences with my reference coworkers. So here's what I want you to do. When I started thinking about strategically learning on the job, I had a map in my mind. I'm sharing it with you here. And that map says, we have professional spaces that we work in, whether it's our team, whether it's our department, our branch, our library system. We have these professional spaces around us. And I can learn and grow if I find a way to take advantage of the experiences in these professional spaces. So what's interesting about this map that I came up with, and this was, gosh, 10 years ago, but what's interesting is, if you, the smaller the circle, the closer it is, the easier it is to get access to those experiences that can help you throughout your career. So, for instance, it's easier for you to plug in and use like an informal experience if it's happening just within your team. But it's harder to plug in to get one of those experiences if it's happening at the very far level out there in like library association land. So I think that the closer the experience to you, the easier it is to get access to those experiences. But you do have to realize that maybe the things that you accomplish and the visibility that you get is going to be smaller because the sphere is smaller. And conversely, if you can plug in and take advantage of some experiences on a bigger level, they might be harder to get access to because, for instance, if you want to join a committee or serve on a board inside of ALA, you have to pay your membership dues, and then you have to also come out of pocket to go to conferences. So the drawback is it's going to be harder to get access to those experiences, but if you do, you might actually have an opportunity to do some work and create some impact that has bigger visibility. So I think that when we think of our own learning experiences, we should try to get a good blend of those things that are close to us and those things that are far away from us. And the thing is, if you can show some success in the areas that are closer to you, in my experience, you get afforded opportunities to move further and further away and have more impact and more visibility outward. So on the screen here, I have some examples of those 70% activities that I believe that are available all around you. Now, the ones that I highlighted in orange, these are just my personal favorites because they've been so beneficial to my own career. But, for me, like participating on committees, they gave me an opportunity to lead and even manage some projects when my day job didn't. And I'll be the first to admit that I have more leadership experience than I have management experience, but I've been able to successfully point to my leadership experience in lieu of management experience, and that's really helped me progress in my career. I'm also a big fan of like these stretch activities, these stretch assignments. Every day that you're not stretching is a day that you atrophy in my mind. But the beauty of a stretch assignment is not only does it give you a chance to grow, but it also provides you a safety net if you fail. Because it's understood from the outset that you are venturing into something that's outside of your expertise or outside of your comfort zone. And also, when you do a stretch activity, you tend to have like a supervisor or a mentor or someone that you can stay in touch with, and you can constantly, debrief on what's working, what's not, and what you might do differently. I also really like the idea of experimenting. When I was a kid, I used to do something, right? I mean, I remember being 5 years old, and every time I saw something red on the ground, I would pick it up and put it in my mouth. I know you're thinking like, ooh, that's nasty. But I was experimenting to see what it tasted like. And I think that as we get older, we forget what it's like to experiment. We lose that sense of adventure and curiosity. And so I want to challenge you on your job to look for those red objects, pick it up off the ground and put it in your mouth and see what happens. We need to experiment more. And then lastly, I'm always a huge fan of like applying anything that you've learned to your current job, whether it's new learning or applying lessons learned from the past. These are really good ways to grow through your learning experiences. So let's look at where we can get those other opportunities. The others are 20%. It's the social learning. It's learning with and through others. And this is like another type of informal learning that you have access to in your workplace. And the beauty of it is social learning is free. There isn't like a clean and tidy line between learning through experience and social learning, but I will say with social learning, the focus is on the relationship and how we can maximize that so that I learn and you learn and everyone learns. It's like Oprah giving away cars. You get a car and you get a car and you get a car. We all get a car. We all learn together. This is great. When we learn together, we really raise the votes for everybody. So, I mean, social learning makes a whole lot of sense because it's efficient and it's effective. The library doesn't have to spend a cent to encourage it, and also the learning sticks because it's happening in the context of the job. Social learning is also, I think, it's fulfilling to everybody involved. Like less senior staff members can coach people up, and more senior staff members can kind of get insights into different parts of the organization because they're working with people further downstream. And then also, social learning, it happens in context, it happens in time, and it's not reactionary. One of the things about formal learning typically is that by the time you have to train somebody, it's already too late. You're doing it in reaction, but with social learning, it can be done at the time of need. And so that's a really good thing when you think about it from like an organizational perspective. So like for me, in my own career, I would tell you the way that I became a trainer happened through social learning. I was in a position back in 2005. I was a library associate, and I was spending part of my time working in a branch, and I had an opportunity to spend part of my time working in the training department. So this was a hybrid position, and the time that I was spending in the training department was really just to go schlep papers for the training manager. But the training manager, one day he says, I'd like to kind of stretch you a little bit and see if you would be interested in helping me with these classes. And so we started off, and this manager knew that, my personality, growing up, I was painfully shy. And so this idea of me being in front of people was very difficult. And so he was like, you know what, you can start off by just doing a 5-minute intro. And over time, it would be like, okay, maybe you can help me co-teach this one section of how we use the integrated library system. And then after that, it would be, could you take this section on how to teach people how to use the integrated library system, because I had the subject matter expertise. And so what would happen was, as he gave me more and more work of this nature, every time a class would finish, we'd sit down and we'd debrief, and we'd look at what worked, what didn't, what we could do differently. And this went on for the course of a year and a half. And by the time this gentleman left the library system to go become a library director, I had his job. And literally, I've been working in training ever since. So from 2007 through today, that's the story of how I ended up getting into the world of learning and development. So it wasn't something that I had naturally in me, but it was because a mentor saw something in me that I didn't and took the time to nurture that and grow it. So again, for you, I say look at the world around you and think about that world in terms of that map that I shared earlier. Whether it's at the branch level, the library system level, at the team level, etc. Think about, are there one or two developmental relationships that you can tap into? Could you be a mentor or a coach? Or vice versa, could you be a mentee or a pupil? Is there some feedback that you might want to get from your peers or leaders at a particular level? And then, like, what would you do with that information? That's my challenge to you. Look for those relationships that you are not leveraging right now and use those to grow and develop. The last piece of where we get those learning opportunities is through the 10%. And the 10% are those formal learning programs like conferences and MOOCs and webinars like today. I would like to say that, we all like going to conferences, right? It's a good thing. We like them. But I think that since we have so limited dollars when it comes to learning and development, that we need to be strategic about what we ask to attend. And then when we do ask to attend, I think that we should be making a business case for why we should be there. Now, I have my own ideas of what should be included into like a business case for asking to go to a conference or a workshop, but there's actually someone who did a better job online than even I did, so I had to borrow this list from her. So I'm not taking credit for this. I'm just simply saying that I got this list from, her name is Beth Ann. It's Beth Ann's information professional blog. But these are the 10 things that Beth Ann says that you should consider putting in your business case. And I like to say that even if your library does not require you to do a business case to attend a conference or a formal learning event, you should do one anyhow, because it shows that you are considering how you want to maximize the library's investment in you, because that investment can get really pricey really fast between registration, travel, hotel, and also your salary and the time away from work. I mean, what might look like a $500 conference on paper really could be $5,000 behind the scenes. And I know this because I used to process these things for a living. So again, be strategic about what you ask to attend. Make a business case. And as you all know, these are the types of formal learning programs that we see out there all the time. And if you have any others that are not on this list, you can share them with everybody through the chat feature. But again, just be strategic about asking what to attend and then leverage the business case to increase your chances of actually being able to go. And it forces you to think about how you're going to apply your learning when you get back. So now that we've talked about getting ourselves aligned with the organization, we looked at some of those free and cost-efficient ways of plugging in and learning and growing on the job. Let's talk about how we can manage all of this through e-portfolios. So in the space of learning, we're constantly having conversations about trying to get organizations and people away from capturing what I call butts and seats information and move towards something more insightful, such as, did somebody learn anything from this experience? Or how are they going to apply what they learn on the workplace? And does the learning make a difference to the library's bottom line? So I believe that when it comes to professional development, if we're not tracking our learning and our growth, we're really squandering resources. E-portfolios are a really good way to like establish your own professional brand. And when it comes to your career development, you need a strong professional brand, and that's a topic for another time. Maybe Cersei will be so kind to invite me back for that one. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But with an e-portfolio, you can showcase your education, your accomplishments, your experience, your work, your projects, your web presence. You can showcase all of that from one place. And so this is also why I like e-portfolios. It helps us tame the beast that's our professional development. I mean, I think people are good at keeping their resumes updated, but that's no longer enough, right? In this world of like constant change, we are having to learn not only to survive, but to thrive. And so we have to be able to tame that hydra of our developmental histories, because we're developing in many ways that are not necessarily formal and that don't necessarily track inside of a learning management system. So we have to find a way to manage all of this and keep it in a place where we can showcase what we learn. So I like to think of it like this. So with the e-portfolio, the mindset is, it's like moving beyond this. Like the traditional mindset is, I went to PLA conference last year, and so that captures butt and seat information, right? It says that you attended a conference. But with an e-portfolio, I think it kind of forces us to say, not only I went to PLA last year, but this is what I learned, and here's how I applied it. Because your e-portfolio showcases how you applied what you learned. So I wanted to share with you briefly 3 tools that I believe that you can use, and they're all free, for creating your e-portfolio. I mean, the first is the Mac Daddy of them all, right? LinkedIn. LinkedIn is out there. It's been out there for a while. I think that it has great functionality to serve as a hub for an e-portfolio. So not only does LinkedIn track your employment history, you can fill it out like a resume, but it also gives you the ability to add different media pieces and documents to really supplement what is contained inside of your work history. So in LinkedIn, you can add in documents, you can add in links to presentations that you've made, and again, it's like, well, what do I put in my e-portfolio? It is what you put in your e-portfolio are the outcomes of how you synthesize your learning. So, for example, here is a slot from when I was a librarian back at Gwinnett County Public Library. So, as a librarian, yes, I learned how to use databases, but the way that I synthesized and shared my knowledge was I took that learning and I put together a presentation for a conference that talked about how you can maximize using Galileo, the statewide database, to increase customer satisfaction. So the output of that was this slide deck for the conference. And similarly, I put together a presentation for how do you plan a professional development program when I was a training manager. So again, this gives you a place to showcase those outputs after you synthesize the learning and share it with other people. And so LinkedIn is a great tool for that. What I like about LinkedIn is it's flat, right? It's a very flat structure. It makes it easy for people to browse and to learn all about you and all about your work. The interface in LinkedIn, and I think most people in here probably have already used it or are very familiar with it, but the interface is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So it's easy for even like the most novice user to get in there and start building an e-portfolio in minutes. And also, LinkedIn accepts content from over 300 different providers, and you can add documents, you can add video, audio, photos, and depending on what market you're in, you can even share some blog pieces that you might publish on LinkedIn. Now, of course, I mean, everything's not sunshine and rainbows with LinkedIn. I mean, that like with any tool, it has cons. So, first of all, in order to take advantage of like the e-portfolio feature in LinkedIn, you have to be a LinkedIn user. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there who just don't want to have to support another social site. So some people don't want to use LinkedIn, and so therefore this would not be a viable option for them. Also, that flat structure that makes LinkedIn so easy to browse, it also can become really busy if you have a lot of like if you have a lot of documents or videos or multimedia to share on your profile. It begins to look really busy. And the thing is, there's only one way that you can view and categorize content in LinkedIn, and that's by job. Some people might want to display their content by competency or by year or what have you, but with LinkedIn, you can only do it by job. So that is a drawback. You're very limited in the way that you can display your portfolio contents. Another tool you can use if you don't want to use LinkedIn is Ufolio. Ufolio.org. This one is completely free. What I like about Ufolio is, like LinkedIn, it's really easy to use. It has a polished look to it. I think it looks pretty sleek, and it gives you the ability to add in content from all over the place, from different social media sites like your YouTube, your Vimeo, SlideShare, SoundCloud, things of that nature. What's really cool about Ufolio is, unlike LinkedIn, it gives you different options for how you want to display your content. So you don't have to necessarily have your content displayed by job. You can display it by project or by achievement, or you can even make your own new categories when you look at the tabs here in the middle of your screen. So for instance, for me, I do like a lot of live presentations, so I have a tab that I keep just for live presentations. And I might also include a tab for my slide decks because I also make a lot of PowerPoints for my presentations. Again, it's like, how can you arrange the view of all of the pieces that you've made after you synthesize and share the knowledge? So the other cool thing about Ufolio too is that you can include anything that has a hyperlink. So it's like the Swiss Army knife of e-portfolios. Now, again, you can load in like your resume, and it displays in pane in Windows, so that's neat. And like I mentioned, you can add in social content from all over the place, YouTube, Vimeo, SlideShare. And what's really neat about this one is, if you also have a blog, you can put in your blog's URL, and it will populate a part of your portfolio with your articles. So that's a really good way to use that RSS feed from your blog. Now, it's not perfect. Um, Ufolio in many ways still feels like a beta. I will tell you that on one day a feature might work, and on the next day it might not. So it still has that very beta feel to it. And then also, you're very limited in your configuration options for Ufolio. I mean, I have not figured out a way to change the color scheme of my Ufolio. In fact, I don't even think it's possible. So yes, while you can arrange the way that your content displays by category, you really don't have much in terms of leeway when it comes to configuring the look and feel of your Ufolio. And then lastly, you can always use the granddaddy of them all. It's Google Sites. What I like about Google Sites is, unlike LinkedIn, unlike Ufolio, Google Sites is more robust because essentially you're getting a free website from Google. So you have a lot of options for how you can change the look and feel of your Google site. And not only can you link to content inside of a Google site, you can also embed it. You can also embed things. You can also upload actual documents, actual audio files, actual video files. So you can actually do the physical uploads, and that's really neat. There's also the ability to allow people to leave comments on the individual pages that are inside of your Google site. And of course, I mean, since it is Google, it has been around forever, so you know that there's some stability there. Now, of course, I mean, it's not perfect. It has cons too. So out of the box, I would say the look of a Google site is pretty dated. I mean, it looks like a static website that was probably built, 10 years ago. So you would need some knowledge of HTML if you want to maximize the way that it looks. I mean, you need to know how to change that yourself. And then I would also say the last big con to like a Google site is, remember, the good Google giveth and the good Google also taketh away. I mean, think about Google Desktop, right? I mean, I was addicted to Google Desktop. It was the only way to help an unorganized guy like me be able to find stuff. And then one day, Google just unceremoniously dumps it. So, of course, there's always a chance that Google sites could get that same kind of treatment. So I know that we've covered a whole lot in the last 45 minutes, really talking about the importance of taking advantage of your career while also thinking about making impact for your libraries. We looked at different opportunities where you can draw from the experiences and the relationships in the world around you to really further your own goals. And then we reviewed some tools for how you can build your e-portfolio. So what I want to do now in our last 15 minutes together is just kind of open the floor for questions, and I am happy to answer whatever I can, and for whatever I can't, I will make up a very clever response that you may believe to be the truth. So with that, I'm opening up the floor.
Perfect. We actually, first of all, we've had a lot of love for Google Desktop come through. So you're not alone in missing that. We also have, our first question is from Deborah, and she's asking, in these days of staff cuts and more work piling on remaining staff, how do you fit all of this outreach and learning into your workday without neglecting your regular work?
So, I mean, that is a very good question. And so my response would be this. Stephen Covey, in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, he has like the Covey quadrant, right? And really, I like to try to challenge people to live in that upper right-hand quadrant. And that is the place where you're really making a strategic focus of creating value and being future thinking. And so, now that's not to say that we're not going to have the stuff that lives below the line, like the day-to-day fires, but I just think that a big part of how do you find the time is how do you eventually shift your focus to, I want to make more impact, so how am I going to get away from taking care of these fires? I mean, so some tactical things might be, is there work that you could delegate to someone? Are there some things that you could literally stop doing? And I will tell you, and I actually teach a workshop on, it's called the Seven Deadly Sins of Time Management. But I mean, but there are some things like you have to learn how to say no, for instance, or perhaps you might have to have that crucial conversation with your supervisor and talk about, well, let's talk about priorities. And if we want this high level thing to be a priority, what are some things that you can help me maybe take off my list, or what are some things that we can stop doing? So, I mean, the answer to how do you get more time is a little bit complicated, but I think first and foremost is shifting your perspective to, I want to contribute more impact on a higher level, and I want to try to find a way to get some space away from the day-to-day fires, or the day-to-day work that's not really driving us to anything that's great. It's just kind of keeping us at good. So I would pause there and just and say, does that answer the question? And also, I could if this user wanted it, I could send her the link to my slide deck for the 7 deadly sins of time management.
Everyone would like the link to that, so we will find a way to get that out to everyone. We have time. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. Absolutely, yep. I'm happy to share that, and everybody can use it, download it, whatever.
Perfect. We actually have time for about one or two more questions. The first one is from Rachel, and she asks, what if I tried to ask my immediate supervisor to go to a conference that I am positive would benefit the library, as it is something similar we want to do, but he shot it down? Is it inappropriate to go over his head?
So, all right. So this is another one of Jay's dangerous ideas, right? And if you get in trouble for it, you can always blame me. What are they going to do? Fire me? And I don't for libraries anymore, so I'm not scared to say this. So I believe that I believe in the chain of command, and I believe that we should never. Well, I won't say never, but I believe that you really shouldn't try to go over someone's head. However, I do believe in this whole idea of circumnavigating obstacles. And so what I would say is I don't think there's anything wrong if by chance you were to have an offhand conversation with, your boss's boss and really try to paint a picture of how this conference could be beneficial. I mean, say that you might just bump into that person at the water fountain, or you might bump into that person in the workroom, and you're not necessarily asking to go to the conference. You're just saying, hey, there's this cool conference going on, and I know that our library system we probably can't do this, but I just want to get your thoughts on what do you think about this conference, because maybe one of my friends might be able to go. You see? So I do believe that there are times when circumnavigating the rules is the thing to do.
Awesome. I'm going to ask one more question. Again, thank you everyone for your participation today. We have had some great questions come in. This last one is from Susanna, and she asks, how do you inspire your staff to have the passion for personal growth that you have as a leader?
Yeah, so the whole thing with like inspiring people to like have that growth, I believe that you have to have the ability to sell somebody a story. And inside of your story, you have to be able to paint that picture of what's in it for those people personally, right? And the thing is, I think that everyone has a selfish want to get ahead in their career. They might want to make more money. They might want to do a job that's less sucky. So it's all about, how can you paint that story of, you're not learning for the library, you're learning for you, and this is here to benefit like your own professional growth. This is all about finding you like that next great job, and just the natural byproduct of you learning, you just help the library become better. So it's really flipping that narrative, right? It's really flipping the narrative away from you're learning to help the library be better to you're learning for you, and the byproduct of you learning and plugging in is you help the library become a better place. So that would be the just the 30-second answer to how do you get people to take that. And again, I think I do have some resources in my slide decks for how do you sell a story, and I'd be happy to send that on as well when I can find it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's, I think, all the time we have for questions. Um, but again, if you asked a question and it wasn't answered during this Q&A session, we will be forwarding those on to Jay.
All right. Well, I think that we have gotten all the way to the end, so I'll just say this. I mean, to tie it all together, I think that as information professionals, and it doesn't matter what position you're in inside of the library, but as information professionals, we all play really key roles in propelling our libraries into the future. But just as importantly, and maybe even more so importantly, we also have like this responsibility to ourselves to learn and to stretch and to grow so that we can better our own lives, so we can better our own careers. So it doesn't matter if your library system has a $500,000 budget that's earmarked for learning and development, or if your library has $0 at all. You personally have the power, I believe, to shape your own path. And so when you leverage those experiences and those relationships around you, you get access to like all of these learning opportunities at your fingertips that you might not even have been paying attention to. So I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to start looking for those learning opportunities that's on your team or within your branch or within your department and so on. and be adventurous. Take advantage of like new or underutilized relationships that are within your library system, that are within your community, that's within the profession. I want you to be strategic, but also be bold and make a business case about attending that awesome conference that you've always wanted to go to. And don't just keep a list of the things that you've learned. Make something new of it. Apply that learning, and then really go out of your way to like share that with other people. And more importantly, showcase your learning inside that sexy e-portfolio that you're going to create. But more than anything, I believe we all need to walk away with this. There's no such thing as luck. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation. Thank you. If you want to reach me personally, there's my email address, and also you can follow me on Twitter at Lawless Librarian. Notice that there's no I between the L and the B. I really appreciate your time and your attention and your participation today, and hopefully this won't be the last time.